All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accessibility Talks, the monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker to present a topic, and afterwards, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. I'm your host today. My name is April Sides. I'm a senior software engineer at Red Hat, and I'm based in Asheville, North Carolina. My pronouns are she, they, and I am wearing my red Alley Cat shirt. You see my little cat, and my black Red Hat hoodie. And let's get going. Before we get too far into the talk, I want to let you know that we do have live transcripts available at streamtext.net/player?event=A11yTalks. Now, this link should be available in the YouTube chat, so look there. That's kind of a tricky one to get. And you can also enable the YouTube closed captions if that works better for you. I want to take a moment to remind everyone that our group seeks to provide a friendly, safe environment. We require all participants to adhere to the Accessibility Talks Code of Conduct. This applies to all community interactions and events. This also applies to verbal questions as well as chat and text channels. This Code of Conduct can be found on our website at a11yTalks.com. All participants should be able to engage in productive dialogue and should share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect. I want to give a shout out to our Alley Cat Club members. Thank you so much for your monthly financial contributions that help us do cool things here at Alley Talks. Do you want to see your name on the list? Visit our website to learn more about our budget priorities, our goals, and how you can join the Alley Cat Club too. If you have any questions for our speakers, please add the hashtag AlleyTalks, that's A11yTalks, or type into the chat window if you're participating in the YouTube live stream event. At the end of the presentation, we'll take some time for Q&A. So today, we have with us Jesse Dick. He is a solutions architect at Evolving Web. Jesse, we didn't come up with a fun fact for you. Do you want to say anything cool about yourself on the fly?
I do have a fun fact, actually. There are actually two Jesse Dicks in my hometown. We kind of follow each other around, and sometimes makes for some very interesting introductions to new people. Sometimes when somebody might know the other one and not me.
Interesting. Probably a lot of mail sharing as well. Cool. All right. We also have Farhat Keeler, a UI engineer at Evolving Web. Farhat, you said you have some interesting things that happen with your emails as well. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's common that I'm receiving a lot of emails which starts with hello first because of English autocorrection. It's funny for me. I hope it's funny for you too.
Yeah, I guess you know really easily how to spot the spam. Yeah. All right, cool. And then we have Jesse James, who's the Director of Design and Operations, or Design Operations at Exygy. Pronounce that properly. Your fun fact is that you like groups of animal names or even redwood trees. What do you call a group of redwood trees?
So yeah, collective nouns are something that I like to collect. We have an activity at Exygy where you sort of like have these icebreakers. And so, yeah, a couple of things that I've learned are a collection of zebras is called a dazzle, which I've seen this in real life. The SF Zoo, they have zebras, and when they come out of their pen in the morning, like they run by each other, creating this pattern. And then a collection of redwood trees is called a cathedral, which again, if you've ever sat with some redwood trees, it's very beautiful.
Nice. That's interesting. Cool. Well, welcome everyone to Alley Talks, and you all are going to present on creating a better web through accessible design systems. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. I'll give us a start off here. So just a quick introductions to who we are, the Evolving Web team and the Exygy team. So Evolving Web, we are a digital agency partner that sets meaningful stories in motion through digital platforms designed for growth. We help organizations adopt to the ever-changing digital landscape with tools to own and grow a meaningful digital presence. So their message can make its mark. That's Evolving Web.
Cool. And meanwhile, at Exygy, we're a B Corp, and we partner with social impact organizations to design and build technology that improves lives, which can mean a lot of things. One of the big projects that we work on is an affordable housing platform for the Bay Area called Bloom, which has been in San Francisco, Alameda, San Jose, and San Mateo County, and will shortly come to the entire 9-Bay County. Bay Area. So that's all very exciting. And we try to do that in the most equitable and accessible way, which again overlaps with what we'll be talking about today. So by way of an agenda, I just want to thank everybody again for having us here today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with my colleagues from Evolving Web. So accessibility and design systems are two topics that really excite me. Some of the topics we'll cover today include how designing for accessibility makes websites better for everybody, how accessibility, when built into design systems, can actually have a cumulative effect and make it easier for teams to design in more accessible ways. We'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. So first off, why is accessibility better for everyone? If you take a step back, web accessibility fits inside of a larger umbrella concept called inclusive design. And inclusive design considers that at some point in our lives, we all benefit from the affordances that we make for people with disabilities. It puts us all on a spectrum of ability and shows that updates that we make, like high color contrast, closed captioning, while they were originally intended for people with permanent disabilities, can benefit everyone at some point in their life based on their situation or their context. Some examples of someone walking in a bright room or sort of bright sunlight is going to benefit from high color contrast or dark mode. And these are things that were originally designed for somebody with low vision. And then someone in a noisy environment or sort of like experiencing like live music at a concert is going to benefit from closed captioning, which was originally designed for people who are hard of hearing. So some additional benefits that kind of trickle down from all of this are better SEO based on semantic markup that includes all images using the correct heading levels for your content, which ultimately means reaching more and more people. So people with some sort of disability make up roughly 15% of internet traffic. And then when you consider situational limitations that we talked about, like the examples we said, like the number of people served by accessible affordances grows and grows to include almost everybody. So it's important to remember that inclusive design recognizes that there are people who are being excluded and being turned away. A really good analogy for this in the analog world is how ramps operate in physical locations. I think it's important when you consider the user experience of people with limited mobility. Again, these ramps don't just benefit people in wheelchairs, but they're also going to benefit over time people who are using crutches, strollers, and luggage. But from my very recent experience walking with a toddler in an urban environment, ramps really come in handy and sort of make it easier for her to experience the world. So what is an accessible design system, right? So it recognizes that everyone is aware of what design systems are. They are, as teams and products scale and grow, design systems provide components and standards that allow everyone to work consistently and efficiently. It's worth noting that design systems are not just components, but they're how design intent and decisions are communicated, implemented, and operationalized. On the business side of things, they save money. But then on a user experience side of things, they provide consistency. So this is the overlap that I'm interested in us talking about today, how embedding accessibility inside of our design systems can spread learnings faster across teams, leveling up everyone, and how those benefits can scale to create consistently accessible experiences for more and more people. So that's the sweet spot that I think if we can kind of dig into that with some of the discussion. So if design systems are about empowering your team and accessibility is about including more and more people, it seems like there's a huge potential to empower more people, our teams, to include more and more people at scale, including those who've been traditionally left out. So that leads us to our discussion. So I don't think we need the slide. I think we can sort of like look at everybody's pretty faces and kind of like get into it. Again, I want to thank Jesse and Farhat for joining me today. I'm really excited about this introduction, this conversation. So if you want to start with more detail about each of us, Jesse and Farhat, if you want to start.
Yeah, I can take it away. So yeah, just another quick little bit of expanding on my role at Evolving Web. I'm a solutions architect here, and that sort of takes me through the whole life cycle of a project that we're working on, from looking at things before we really get into it, before we're even committed to working on that project, sort of in the pre-sales area, all the way up to the early technical scoping and the development and to the finish line. And I think that really puts me in an interesting role where I'm able to really help guide some of the accessibility work throughout the whole project, advocating it as the person helping to scope out the project, and then also as the person sort of as acting as the technical lead as the project continues to go through the development and QA and basically the whole rest of the project up until the finish line.
My turn, I guess. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm an UI engineer. Basically, besides reviewing the designs and flagging possible issues beforehand, my role in the company includes also actively joining the front-end dev phases and doing accessibility tests, audits for our projects. Also, I'm supporting the dev, design, and marketing teams regarding to accessibility if they need.
Great. For myself as design director, I focus on both operations and design systems, and accessibility shows up as a part of a human-centered design process. So the work that we're trying to figure out now is how to get accessibility kicked off and who's responsible for it at every stage of the process. Again, it's a very technical thing to a lot of people, or they're very generic things like color contrast. And designers think, well, if I do color contrast, then my job's done. But there's so many other parts of that process that we want to sort of like build up and strengthen. And part of my job is to kind of like make sure that process is sustainable and not overwhelming and not blowing up costs, and that people feel like they have the tools and resources they need to show up and do this confidently, because it can be intimidating to like work in accessibility. Like, I don't know, that's not my job, or there's a lot of responsibilities, so people feel pressure to get it right. And so it can, again, sort of lead to like people feeling, again, separate from it, and really trying to basically give people confidence this is something that they can participate in. So again, we're talking about two topics that it seems like people are talking about more, maybe it's just me, but it seems like people are bringing these up more and more, both design systems and accessibility. And I'm really excited that we have this opportunity to talk about both of them at the same time. So I'm curious to hear from both of you. What was your first introduction to one or both concepts, and how they sort of like relate to each other? Yeah. Farhat, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think on my side, design systems came first, but we didn't know that there was a term for what we were doing in those days. Basically, before working on Evolving Web, in all my workplaces I worked for, we outsourced the dev phase to other people. So we were always looking for solutions to use time efficiently and make the collaboration between designers and developers more straightforward and practical. So we came up with our primitive but collective some kind of language between designers and developers. And then, of course, then later on, we start to learn more about design systems and other front-end frameworks, and these naming become more and more efficient. But on the other hand, accessibility has been in my life like 3.5 years. This is just after moving to Canada, because right now in my home country, still there isn't any regulations. I hope it will be soon.
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like along the same lines, design systems probably came up more in my sort of day-to-day, although it was probably something, like Rod said, it wasn't really something that was called design systems at that point, earlier versions of that. I think really it's only been the last like 7 to 10 years for me that practicing accessibility, sort of going beyond just talking about it and actually implementing some of these more technical ideas in terms of the development side of things and how to actually build these accessible websites. It's really been that 7 to 10 years that this really become possible. But I also feel like maybe it's coming from more of a development role, that going back even before that, like the 2000s era sort of web standards initiatives, that really sort of laid the groundwork for us to be able to have a lot of these accessible things now. Because I feel like without some of that, we might not have had that the underpinnings that would allow us to build things like web standards, standard markup, and the standards bodies, like of course the W3C, have been incredibly important for that. So I feel like they've been laying that groundwork, and we couldn't be where we are today really without that. So I guess kind of what I'm saying is they kind of both go back in history, and both are evolutions from where we're coming from, in terms of how they've evolved over the past number of years. So maybe it's hard for me to say really which one sort of came up first. They're both kind of growing on or building on things that came before them.
Yeah, that's great. Again, I could just sort of echo everything that I've heard. Like, yeah, we called them other things, right? We called them pattern libraries. We called them component libraries, documentation. For me, it was responsive design. So I was a designer that worked back and forth between mockups and markup. And so like I really cared about making sure my designs were rendered correctly or with my intent. And then with responsiveness, I really just had to get in there. So I had learned markup and did all this sort of like research around like this, I think same thing, like semantics, like Jeffrey Zeldin, all this stuff. Like what is truth? Like, what do I need to do? And when you strip it back and kind of strip it back, like it really matters the markup that you're using for lots of reasons. As a crafts person trying to figure out what is the way in which I can do this to kind of communicate my intent to the next person. And then the byproduct that being like SEO and all these sort of like ways in which we're sort of building these things in smarter and smarter ways. So like it can like resonates a lot of what you both have said, or sort of how all this stuff came together. And on the accessibility side, again, before Exygy, I was just sort of making websites for people, like after working, like doing benefits stuff, like really focusing on like meeting the needs of marginalized folks, especially the Bloom housing stuff. Like we had a mandate where we had to kind of get in there. We had to work with Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco, and like we were sort of like really make sure the things that we were doing were meeting the needs of those folks. And then again, we had to bake accessibility into our components to make sure that, again, simple things like color contrast are being taken care of, but then like there's a lot of form elements in the application process of really making sure it was error handling that really was like the wake up call. Like we really need to get this right. You know what I mean? Like if we don't want to trap people in these experiences, we really need to make sure how they work. And again, we need to bake it into the pieces of the design system. So again, we're creating useful experiences. Yeah, any other notes about how they're related, or do we kind of cover all that? Any other notes that either of you have around kind of the overlap between the two?
I mean, for me, I realized that it's interrelated after getting more roles in the project's development phases and getting more and more tasks about accessibility. We need to fix the accessibility issues. We need to fix this one, etc. And as a result of being on both sides of the website building, on the design and the development, so I realized most of these accessibility issues can be solved in the design phase. So I thought, and with the design system, it might be more efficient for the time and development phases. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. Like it's, when we're building some pretty complicated websites, it's pretty important to try to find ways to ensure that we can sort of bringing everything together and doing it in efficient ways and ensuring that we have everything covered. And that's, I think, where design systems and accessibility really are interrelated, in the sense of trying to ensure that everything is taken care of in an efficient way, but also just being effective at building these websites, bringing together everything between the design and the code, and everything beyond that as well. I think design systems really can help to ensure that we've basically got everything covered, to find to make things efficient in that way. I really feel like they've always been sort of linked in my head. Like as soon as I really started to connect the two, that design systems was this word and accessibility is this concept, they always felt like they were connected. They always felt like there's a huge overlap, and that they really do help one another and build off one another.
Excellent. And again, nothing's learned in a vacuum, right? So this, like, we all kind of got here on the shoulders of others. Are there folks that inspired either of you along the way that you wanted to call out?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was just listening to a great interview on a podcast called Skip to Content. And it was an interview with Jeremy Keith, who's somebody I followed for an incredibly long time. I mean, he's been in the industry for a long time. He's definitely, I would say, a must follow for anybody working in the industry, whether you're a developer or a designer, or even working on more of the content side of things. He has this book that he wrote, which is actually naturally available as a website, fully accessible, beautifully marked up if you look at the code. And it also has a podcast version, so if listening is easier, that's available. But it's called Resilient Web Design. And I read it a long time ago. I've listened to it again fairly recently, because it's something that you can always just turn back to. I wouldn't say it's specifically about accessibility or design systems or anything like that, but what it really is about is, I would say, it's more implicitly about those things, because it really gets into understanding the web better, what it is and where it came from, and how to use it to its full potential. I think it's been really it's really eye-opening, which is actually why I've kind of gone back to it a couple of times as well. But it just sort of helps you to understand how these things built on one another, like I mentioned earlier, how they built on the web standards initiatives and whatnot, and the importance, how that all interlinks with accessibility, all that importance of how they're all linked together. So he's a must follow for me, somebody who's you'll never stop learning from following someone like him.
For me, I don't have any famous person in my mind, but I think regarding to accessibility, I should mention Suzanne Dergicheva. And that might sound a little bit, I'm trying to be employee of the month, but that's not the case. And she's one of our co-founders. And when I first joined the Evolving Web, I heard a lot of things about accessibility, and at some point I decided to learn about it. And Suzanne in those days were giving trainings about accessibility, so I jumped into one of them, and I learned a lot, because she's a great educator, and I realized this is a really important thing that we need to implement all of our projects. So that's why I think I should mention Suzanne. Thanks, Suzanne.
That's great. I agree with the Jeremy Keith piece for sure. Very fundamental, along with Zeldman and the web standards stuff. The idea of progressive enhancement, like what is really foundational, sort of with the mobile first stuff and how it all kind of layers together. Treating this core experience like it's just the markup, and anything off top of that is nice to have. It was really good, again, craftsperson discipline, sort of building experiences. On the other side of things, Nathan Curtis, who's sort of amazing thought leader when it comes to design systems and the complexity of documenting them at scale, was one of the first people who kind of dug into color contrast combinations, not just presenting colors. Here's my color palette, but presenting ranges of colors that I can present content on top of those colors. Really make color does not exist in isolation. It's always paired with another color. So just really helping me think about the choices that I'm making as a designer. And then I got to see Stephanie Walter speak at Clarity Conference this year, and she gave an amazing talk about documenting accessibility as part of the design process, which again, not to harp on this, but goes well beyond color contrast, like heading order, source order, touch target size, alt labels for images, like alt labels for icons, all these things you need to think about, which is your responsibility, because otherwise you're like passing the buck or like transferring that labor to an engineer. It's not that they don't care, they just don't have the time. And so they're just going to kind of fill it in. So it's our responsibility to kind of get in there and actually work on that stuff together, which again, I think, again, it's not that anybody's like, they're not trying to escape responsibility. They just don't know, and so once like having checklists and processes that people can use, I think really kind of like makes it definitely feel like more collaborative. It's great. Yeah, and so next up, responsibility, partnership, how are we all working together? So design and engineering are like, going to be like overlapping and all this stuff. So what have you both learned about that partnership between design and engineering when it comes to specifically accessibility and design systems?
I think for me, if I think about it from from the developer perspective, I feel like this is exactly where design systems are incredibly important, because really, like, developers oftentimes, we're just trying to make our lives easier and not repeat everything that we're doing a bunch of times and rebuild the wheel basically every single time, and oftentimes that involves creating like a reusable library of components, and we'll look to maybe bake in all that, building each one as being fully accessible and whatnot, and try to make that library and do it in the way that maybe we never really have to go back to that. Like, we might just want to build it once and not really have to revisit that again. But in reality, that's not really how it works. And so I think this is where the design systems really comes into play, because if we try to build like a one and done reusable library, as soon as it starts getting out there, being used and stretched a little bit, things will start to show us some of the cracks and everything. So I think that from project to project and from revision to revision, there needs to be this consideration of accessibility throughout the whole process. It's not really something that can just sort of happen once and be left alone. And it is part of that system that's constantly being worked on and adjusted and and evolved. And the designs change, the functionality changes throughout the whole life cycle. Maybe from project to project, all this stuff is going to change. New interactive elements come in, or maybe new animations are brought in, and that all needs to be factored in again. So it really isn't this like one and done sort of solution. You can't just build like a platform, or rather a component library that's just sort of it's accessible and it's done. We can't really think of this as like a checkbox that we can say that okay, it's accessible and it's done. It's really a constant thing, not just something in our project management tool that says this is at the end of the sprint and at that point we're done. It's something that has to be in the whole process, and that includes in the design system phase, just factoring in how how the whole life cycle of this of these components and of this design system is gonna end up working. So that partnership, I think, is what's incredibly important because of that, because it is more of a collaborative thing. It might be more heavy on some sides of the process at one part, but it's still a collaborative process, and I think the whole team, not just the UX designers or the UI designers or the developers or even the content editors, it's not like we just shift it from team to team as a project lifecycle goes. It's that collaborative effort across the whole lifecycle.
Cool. Yeah, we have always like working on roles and responsibilities, like I was saying before, like who owns what at what time, like, but is there this idea of handoff, or can you both hold the thing at the same time? Basically, like W3C actually has this like spec, like it's called ARM that they're working on, ARM, ARRM, which is like just that, what are the roles and responsibilities? Whose job is this? Who holds this at this any given time and place? We just finished a collaboration with Lighthouse for the Blind, who came in to kind of work on the affordable housing project with us and kind of do an audit. And we realized we needed to train our team just to kind of understand what they were coming back with, you know, and then to understand whose job is it anyway to kind of do this stuff. So we had them come in and teach the team how to use screen reader software, like screen reader technology. We made some investments in some tools that actually allowed you to, as you're designing or building, check this from the perspective of somebody who experiences this with the proper technology and tools, be it JAWS or NVDA, whatever it is. So you can actually start to troubleshoot the user experience, right? Because otherwise you're kind of working this weird game of telephone where you're kind of like trusting, throwing something over the wall and saying, I hope it kind of gets over there. And our team naturally came to a place where engineers were like, hey, we'll take it from here. We kind of figure out some of these pieces that are more technical. And then those places where it's more of a user experience thing. So we came up with a format that basically like for a template for our story writing issues that each member of the team actually has a piece of like the accessibility or acceptance criteria. Like some of those things are design intent things, some of those things are going to be technical things, some of those things are going to be QA items that the product person needs to build. So we did come up with kind of a template that again assigns different members of the team to be responsible for different levels or parts of the feature, so that again all those needs are being met, and we're not like passing that responsibility off to somebody else that's not their specialty. But things also don't always go right. And so like in the spirit of vulnerability, I think we're talking about like blue sky and stuff here. Are there examples when things were not working and you needed to figure some things out, and the learnings that you'd like to save other people the pain that you had to suffer in figuring them out?
On top of my mind, actually there are two things I can mention. For example, testing the website for accessibility or maintaining a website always accessible is quite hard to do. Maybe the worst thing could be done is, okay, we designed our website, it looks great, and okay, we build it, it's great. Now let's test its accessibility features. This is the worst thing that could be done. So I think the best way to do is creating variables, placeholders, and patterns, templates for each components or each style guide elements and design system elements. That way you can test items on the smallest way, and you can duplicate or reuse in your web page and web pages. And it will reduce to make mistakes on accessibility, and you will also give some flexibility with some kind of limitation to the editors. Actually, it's the best way. That's what I think. And the other thing is, actually, there is a quite popular topic in accessibility. Whoever talks about accessibility, always you hear about images needs alternative text. All the images needs alternative text. And this is the worst, not the worst actually. It's kind of a wrong knowledge. All images shouldn't contain alternative text. We need to first define the image. What kind of image is that? Is it informative? Is it complex image? Or is it just decorative image? So if it is informative, yeah, definitely we need to implement and give some alternative text for them. But if it's decorative, it might be annoying for screen reader users in the end. Let's say you build a card or hero banner with your latest news with a completely irrelevant image, like two-person businessman walking in the road with their bags, whatever. And if you apply the same alternative text to this image, screen reader will hear your title of the news and also the alternative text, which will be only annoying for them, and it will be kind of a noise actually, and it's unnecessary. That's what I can think of right now.
Yeah, I think those are some good examples. One other one that I could think of would be just sort of with maybe it's like the interaction between components, or even components and content. I think that the perfect example in my head is like when we start dealing with components that might have that might interact with the heading hierarchy. When we're marking up the actual content, we might want that to be like an H2 or an H3, and if that's sort of baked into a component, maybe in the design phase, it was decided that works best as an H2. But we need to also then factor in, well, it's going to go in some content with other things, and how do we ensure that they're all connecting together correctly? It might be that it should actually be an H3 or an H4, and so leaving that as just an H2, if we sort of bake that into that component, that's going to end up not really fitting well into that document structure, into the hierarchy. So there's ways that can be maybe considered in the design system and as the components are being implemented, to make that a little more flexible. It's a challenging thing, because you can't really, if you can look at something like exposing new controls to the content editors to be able to change that themselves, or baking it in and only allowing it at that one level, but you're sort of adding and removing complexities at different levels. And it's always like where do you want to do that at this one project? Does it make sense to do it, to give that onus onto the content editor, or maybe it's that it needs to be somewhere else? And those basically those interactions between some of those components. It's always a difficult one to really consider, especially in the earlier phases, how that's going to affect things down the line.
Yeah, no, I love both those examples. The heading level conundrum is real. So yeah, I think if it's, we both do CMS and so React stuff. So when you can make it a property, you just make it a property, you can assign it. But yeah, when it's within a fixed layout that can be adjusted, it gets a lot more complicated based on where it is in the order. But yeah, the fact that it's not fixed, I think, is at least starting there. I think is a really good place for folks to be. Yeah, and the icon problem too, that for you mentioned, like again, we have icon only buttons, like really making sure that we kind of expose labels on those things so that there's something there. Again, the design looks a lot better when there's just an icon, because of the layout and stuff. That's great. But the screen reader needs something as well. So like again, the designer's job is kind of like, what are we going to call that? Making sure that's done kind of consistently. The other one that is sort of like experience-wise, we think about user experiences as sort of like, moving from screen to screen as a designer, but focus state is like a real big deal. Where focus ends up, especially in complex components, is a real big deal. And so if my job is the user experience, my job is to kind of tell you what I expect somebody to experience. And so like in the modal, where does it go? Does it go to the title? Does it go to the close button? Does it go to the content? Does it go to the form element? Like really considering screen reader experience and focus is like, it's just something that needs to be considered. Again, it's not like a developer may have a different assumption than I have, and then a screen reader user has a separate assumption. So it's always good to kind of check that and really make sure you're on the same page about what a screen reader user is going to get, and if that aligns with what you intended. What's really helpful there is to actually sit with somebody who uses these things and ask them. It's like rule number one is like, what would you expect? That always sort of like gets rid of the ambiguity and the debate about that stuff. So yeah, these things aren't cheap. This all sounds like a lot, right? We've been talking about a lot of things, and this sounds like more. So how do we justify this stuff and validating that the things that we're doing actually are worth it? Do either of you have examples about how we can do that, either justify it or validate that we're successful?
If we think about the design throughout the years, designers are pushing boundaries and always trying to new things. We are conducting research before UI implementation, and we are creating more white space. And I think all the main goal behind this is creating more effective way and make it more communication between content and the user, make it better and increase it, and make it easier, more enjoyable for users to consume the content. So if these approaches already are adding value to your product, so why not reaching out to more people with adding accessibility features? Because right now, we know that 15% of the population is already having difficulties to using website. So, and when you reach out to them, okay, it might be because of only laws or regulations, but in the end, you will also increase your public image, and you will get a great CEO by implementing your accessibility features, and you will comply the law and regulations. And I believe it sounds like a win-win for everybody, actually.
Yeah, I love that idea of like thinking about like the user experience, and I think we probably touched on this a couple of times, but it really does apply to so many different areas to create a better user experience. But that said, I think it also depends on the individual sort of business cases that we're dealing with. In some places it might be good to provide a whole bunch of these different examples of like cases where some of these enhancements will help a lot of people. And I think going back to that example of the physical environment, pushing the stroller up the ramps and everything that sort of exists in the physical world, I think those are really good examples because they're really concrete with the examples there. And so, it's good to sort of use those types of examples, even though maybe, some folks might not think that their audience has those particular needs. These examples might show them that even if you don't think that way, first of all, it's probably not true, but also there are other reasons to consider all this as well, because it provides this enhanced user experience across the board. And Farak sort of touched on this too, the fact that more and more areas are starting to see governments stepping in, just like we have with building codes, where they're starting to step in and say, we actually do need to have accessibility compliance in these areas. So at the end of the day, it might just be that, these sort of regulations around the world are starting to raise this discussion and make it more to add the business value in that way. Even though it might be happening slowly, it's still happening, definitely.
That's great. And so to wrap up, I just want to recognize times. I think we have time for one more question here. What has changed in the industry or your perception since you started all of this work as it relates to ALI accessibility?
I mean, nowadays, maybe like we mentioned, because of regulations or other reasons to make your website better looking and public image, people are getting more interested in making their websites accessible. But I believe even in 3.5 years, the perception of web accessibility has changed. Because when I heard about the accessibility, all the clients were doing it because of its mandatory thing, kind of mandatory thing. But now they know accessibility is important and have started prioritizing accessibility from the start of the project. Even yesterday, I was on a call with a client, and it was a completely irrelevant meeting. It wasn't related to accessibility, but they were talking about the design update, and they told that we want to implement this here. It will be a functional thing, it could be slideshow or something, but we have concerns about accessibility. And I was surprised because it's getting more and more popular, and people know, and I think already that awareness has already created, and it's increasing every day. It's great to hear that from a client. And also, if you Google accessibility, and you will get lots of results about companies, apps, or tools, and only specialized on accessibility. So I think it looks like it's already becoming an industry of its own, I believe.
Yeah, and actually echo that on the tools. That's really a really big one. I think it makes it much more achievable for the rest of us as well to be able to really focus on these things. But it just as a whole, I think that the the discussion is happening at different levels. I feel like in the past, maybe there was a bit more of a bottom-up discussion around, developers who had who thought that this was the right thing to do, that were maybe trying to find ways to put this focus into their projects, or designers or whoever. And maybe it wasn't a discussion that was happening sort of at the higher levels when the project is being, at the inception of a project or something like that. But now I think that's changing. I think we're seeing that discussion happening sooner in the process. And again, sort of at different levels. And I don't know, it's possible that that's because of some of these regulations. It's also possible it's momentum. It's the shift of, it's that again, that momentum, that snowball that's picking up speed and continuing to go further and further. And so because we have those tools now that help us, and a lot more resources available, and it's improving. It might also be just because of the web itself is evolving. It's still a fairly young medium, and this is just a part of its evolution. So I don't know. I think just the fact that it's all happening, those discussions are starting earlier. They're happening at a higher level. There's a lot more movement at that in the whole project scope at this point, which is very, very nice to see.
Yeah. No, I think we have seen at Exygy, you've seen it pick up momentum and conversation as part of like larger cultural movements addressing racial justice, equity, informed design, sort of help us align accessibility as part of like a larger inclusive design effort. So I think design systems they just have a lot of power at the end of the day. Like if it's about power and systems of power, it's in the name, right? So this is like where like we're implementing a new system within when there are systemic issues. So there are places for our teams that are turning for a single source of truth. Our design systems become the norm, right? We're the stewards of best practices, helping our teammates make better decisions about the experiences they're creating, sort of like more informed decisions. And so inclusive design is about recognizing systems of exclusion. We have the opportunity to create systems that leverage Ally as part of a way that we can be proactive, inviting everyone to the table and have like improved experiences for everybody. So again, I think there's just a lot of potential to like break old systems, and using these new systems to do that. So yeah, I want to recognize time. I know I want to make sure we have time for the Q&A. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a really great discussion. Thanks for coming. We do have a couple questions in the chat. We're going to start with the one from, I think it's Rajab. Who should lead with accessibility? Architecting the software, UI and UX design, or front-end development?
I don't think it should be only one person who leads the accessibility, because in every level of the project, an accessibility feature should be prioritized, even in UI, UX, or on front-end development. So I can say only one person to lead this accessibility. So everybody needs to have some knowledge about it.
Yeah, I think that you've got you need to buy in from business development to make sure you have the room to do these things, right? So like if anybody's leading, it's like making sure that it's clear, hey, we're going to be doing this work. So if we mean lead in that way, yeah, sure. Like let's align expectations. But yes, there's a lowercase a, it's not uppercase a, because everybody has like a line called accessibility within their responsibilities. But I think making sure you have alignment and handshakes is really good. So people aren't going, hey, why are we spending all this time on this stuff?
Yeah, and then we can even expand it to go into like the content side of things too, right? There's a whole thing that, we're talking a lot about design and development, but there's a whole thing about, content structuring and whatnot when you're dealing with starting to enter data. Say it's, putting your content into the CMS. Well, the person managing that needs to be aware as well, and leading their own little section of that. So definitely, I echo that it spans across the whole range.
Cool. All right, our next question is from Rashmi. How can accessibility become everyone's responsibility in the product team?
getting more information about accessibility and learn about it. I guess that's the only thing that they can do.
Yeah, I would say it's like it's my job, kind of like as a design operations person. Like my job is to train my team to make sure they know it's their responsibility. Because otherwise, they're like, it's my job, right? But it's not my responsibility. So like design systems are like, here's some knowledge. Now I have the confidence to make this my responsibility. So it is somebody's responsibility to train people, give people resources so they feel like they own this stuff and it's their thing to do. So they think people need support in kind of getting to a place where they feel ownership over it.
Yeah, and not to sort of go back on what we just said, but it's always helpful to have like an internal advocate as well, somebody who is really, maybe helping to lead some of that education aspect of it. Having somebody that's going to really push it, because maybe not everybody on the teams are even aware of some of these ideas, and just having somebody to advocate for that is really helpful.
Cool. So we have another question from Adi. How would you change the culture in the company to engage with accessibility? Program managers and business analysts consider it a waste of time, for example, testing with screen readers.
I mean, to what Jesse, like unless you have somebody who's really promoting this stuff, I'm fortunate enough to be in a company where there's a culture that there's sort of like reaching out as part of the work we're doing, like impact is part of how we like measure success. But that was a top down kind of decision. That was sort of part of the design the principles of the company. So I'm in a fortunate position to have not had to overcome that friction. But to what Jesse was saying, if it's on the client side, you do need to find somebody on that side who's going to kind of like voice the importance of this stuff and make sure that it's valued and respected.
Yeah, and I think we could go back to some of our previous examples of providing more information on why it's not a waste of time. What are some of the other benefits? It might be difficult to change somebody's mind on why they think it's a waste of time, but you could try to say that there are additional benefits like SEO, like easier implementation of the website if you're following sort of, to use the example again that I used earlier of the heading hierarchy. There's other benefits beyond just the fact that it provides screen reader users an easier way to navigate the screen and to be able to know to differentiate the different pieces. There's other benefits to it. So if you're really struggling to change their mind on specifically the accessibility focus, maybe it's helpful to shift to some of those other benefits.
And last thing I can add, I guess we shouldn't think accessibility is only for the people who have some kind of disabilities. Actually, it's for everybody. Maybe a user doesn't like to use their mouse to navigate through a website, but they only like to use their keyboard. So it's quite valuable to add that accessibility feature on your website in that case.
Absolutely. All right, we have another question here. What are your thoughts on automation? And I think they're getting at automated testing versus manual testing.
They need to be done together, actually. We cannot choose one to another. And also, I can say do automated tested with multiple tools, not only one, because they are not always 100% accurate, and you can get results from one by using one tool that you don't see that result from another. So I think they are 50-50 equals, and they need to be done together.
Yeah, we're definitely not there yet. I think there's like a stat that somebody said that we can do about 40% of accessibility testing through automated tools. And actually the other day, just to try it out, I asked ChatGPT to do an accessibility audit, and it just said no. We're not there yet, and I don't know if that'll be there. There's a lot that needs to be considered, and there's a lot of human elements that need to be considered when it comes to looking at the accessibility of anything, of a website or whatever. So I think again, there's it has to be done in parallel. They have to be done together. It's not one or the other, unfortunately.
Yeah, I also don't want to alley shame people. Like, there's like layers to this, right? So if all you can afford to do is automating testing, do it, please. Like, yes, use the tools; they're great. Check the box. Please do that first. Then there's this other layer of like, the guidelines are very long. Sometimes I'll get a list from automated testing. It's very, very, very long. And what helps us is to actually talk to a real person, again, with lived experience, to find out, okay, what of this is like really valid and affects your experience? Because some of this stuff is contextual. The computer may pick up something that it says is wrong or right, and it's wrong, right? It's not correct. So having a real human is actually going to save you time and say, hey, 30% of these are actually like, maybe most websites, 90% of websites have these like certain things that they do that everybody does. So you're not really going to make a huge difference. But this subset, these 6 things, these are going to be real experience blockers. Like, focus on these things first. That sort of stuff in the long term actually saves you money and saves you time, because you're actually validating what is affecting people's lived experience. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think that we have come to time for questions. We're going to actually take the remaining questions in the chat. Thank you so much for the questions. These are really great. We'll take those and have the panel answer them through Twitter. Okay, so take a look at our Twitter page for that. So let's go ahead and get our closing slides up. Thank you. Let me find my notes. So coming up in March, and this is actually, I think, in a week or two here, the next generation of automated testing with Cezary Tomczyk, founder of Sitelint. Mark your calendars for March 8th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then just a reminder, we're always looking for speakers and new voices in the accessibility community. So reminder for those with the IAAP certifications, A11yTalks speakers and attendees receive professional development credits, CAEC credits or whatever, through the IAAP for your continuing education. We also make a conscious effort to include marginalized groups in tech in our speaker lineup. Please let us know if you have ideas on how to make A11yTalks more friendly to all. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to never miss a talk. Also consider contributing to the page. You can also follow us on Twitter and Mastodon. We are A11yTalks. And if you can afford to support A11yTalks and help us achieve our mission to normalize digital accessibility through education, please consider joining the AlleyCat Club or give a one-time donation. Go to alleytalks.com/pages/sponsorship to learn more. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. It was a really great discussion. And thank you for everyone who joined us to watch and ask all the great questions. Everyone, have a great day.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.